From the History of the Order of Magi, the Advent Trials. Yet, in contrast to the anxious energy and nervous anticipation of the next day's endeavor, is Morrownight, an event all students at the Orium partake in and revel in the night before. By design, it serves to calm their nerves and offer a way to release their pent-up angst in a celebratory fashion. The night is filled with food and haven ale, a cinnamon-tinged drink of cream, mint pepper, and honey, shipped from Arn itself. Merriment of the highest order follows. Dancing, games, and the occasional stolen kiss is not uncommon. For no matter what the next day may bring, if they succeed, tomorrow will usher in a time for soon-to-be goodbyes. For some. Chronicled by Myas Wynn. This is The First Noel by A. Diallo Jackson. Chapter 2 of Fractures and Friendship. Wilt. The sting from the afternoon still sat with Wilt, a winding, uneasy knot, square in the inner depths of his stomach. It was a fitting companion, the discord he felt since Brid was absent from his side, clear across the room. The Orium students mingled, nearly 200 present, talking and eating, while the various wandering half-dozen half-hearted overseeing adult magisters tucked themselves away, hovering over the food and, less so, the surrounding festivities. Brid and Wilt were in sharp contrast to nearly every other Magi adept and their shepherd candidate. Even the initiate adept, who had barely begun to form those instinctive bonds. Yet while the others congregated in their natural pairs, Wilt and Brid remained apart. Brid's removal from Wilt's side then felt purposeful. He didn't care. No, that wasn't true. In fact, he truly did. But the reality was that he wasn't nearly close enough to a congenial mood to speak with her. And that then left him with only one option, alone, in a room full of people he already felt at a distance from. "Chosen!" a loud bark woofed from across the hall. Gora. Of course. Wilt ignored him and, looking for something, anything to do to signal he was otherwise unimpressed, confidently grabbed at his cup of haven ale. He took a small chug, then slammed the pewter vessel etched with the crest of the Orium of Mirma Men onto the wooden table, making a hollow, firm thunk. Gora laughed and pointed immediately, drawing the attention of those around him. Kent Moore, Gora's shepherd companion, followed the pointing finger to Wilt. Kent, normally more stiff and composed, let out a soft chuckle before returning to whatever conversation he'd been having. He didn't seem truly amused, but he didn't mind placating Gora either. "Here," a short, almost curt voice said behind him. Tenna's long, slender arm reached out a small white napkin, handing it to Wilt. "I don't think you mean to wear that on your face for the rest of the night." "What?" Tenna slid her hand into a small pocket inside her cloak. "Wait." Unlike the other students who were dressed in celebratory attire, she was still in her Magi Adept uniform, formal as it was, but still more studious than festive. A silver tunic and white cloak adorned with ornate designs that marked her status as an Advent Adept. Practice. She must be coming from practice. It's all she ever seemed to do. No wonder she was considered the best Magi Adept to come through the Orium in quite some time, and perhaps all of the Oriums across Adelan once united. When she removed her hand from the pocket, she held a dried flower, a thistle. Wilt was sure of it, though he had never bothered to ask in all these years. There was something about the gesture, a quiet mix of hesitance and a strange, impenetrable armor Tenna seemed to carry around herself. Her demeanor was cold, yet paradoxically full of life. She lacked overt expression, but beneath the surface, coiled and ready to spring, was something else, an unspoken reservoir of vibrant energy. Wilt didn't just see it, he felt it. Beneath her composed and deliberate exterior, he suspected was a person brimming with life in ways her carefully crafted facade seemed determined to obscure. She raised a hand with one pointed finger. The thistle began to glow softly. Silver, with just a hint of blue. Aether, with just a touch of water. She circled her finger in a wide motion in front of his face, creating a large, sparkling ring of glittering, dancing energy. Then the blue expanded, filling the center of the circle like water sliding down and covering a pane of glass. It waved and shimmered for a few moments, calming yet still filled with rippling waves. It was a floating mirror, mere inches from his face. His reflection stared back at him, a young boy, 15, quick on the road to becoming a man. In a few weeks, it would be his 16th birthday. There was the tousled brown hair, more compact than he normally wore it, cut and trimmed in anticipation of tomorrow's testing ceremony. There were the faint traces of freckles that had once covered his face so much more deliberately when he was younger. His face had grown less round now, becoming more angular, and a touch gaunt. His jaw, still thin, was beginning to take shape, a marked difference from the boyishness of even a few months ago. As the surface calmed and the ripples flattened, his features came even more into focus. And there it was, a milk-white mustache clinging to his upper lip. The Haven Ale. He realized what she had meant now. His heart sank as he understood why they had been laughing at him all along. Ugh, he gurgled. Thank you. Tenna sat down delicately beside him. She moved as though she glided. There was an elegance to her, a delicacy that wasn't fragile but precise, as if she had command of every muscle in her body. It might, he thought, explain why she so rarely cracked a smile, though she was occasionally known for a dry joke or a sarcastic jab. No need to thank me, she said. We're all friends here. It was one of her jabs or wry observations. Maybe? He wasn't sure. She leaned her head back to stretch her neck. Her long hair dropped behind her, falling between the table and her back. It swayed in unison, as if it had a life of its own. You know, he could have beaten her today. Wilt paused for a moment. Had the conversation shifted? Had he missed something? Wait. She was talking about Brid. Oh yeah, that, he began. We started with some light sparring, a little preparation for tomorrow, but he trailed off, glancing across the room again. He couldn't even muster the words to finish whatever he started to say. Brid had drifted toward the growing circle around Gora, Kent, and a few of the middle adepts. Dragarin approached, slipping through the tightly packed students from one end of the circle to the other, emerging next to Brid with a Haven Ale mug. He handed it to her. She eyed him suspiciously at first, but with Gora's prodding, she finally took it and drank. There was no pleasure in her expression as she did so, but it had served its purpose anyway. Dragarin gave her a slight nod, which she returned with the faintest twitch of the corner of her mouth. She truly was in no mood for anyone tonight, it seemed, not just Wilt. What torture it must be, Tenna began, turning to him with a quick snap. To be so longingly in love with someone that will never love you back the way you want them to. Wilt flinched, caught off guard, yet again. What? I'm not... he began, but Tenna had already turned away, her attention shifting with deliberate slowness back to the group across the room. "No, Wilt," she said. "Not you." Wilt's eyes trailed the same path as hers. Gora hovered over Brid, but there was something subtly different this time. Beneath his usual loud and boisterous demeanor, there was a hint of nervousness. Wilt had never noticed it before, perhaps because Gora's relentless teasing and ribbing left little room to imagine him as anything other than a brash, overbearing presence. But there it was, behind the brutishness, Gora, cast in the part of a love-struck schoolboy. Brid, for her part, seemed unimpressed. Her gaze was fixed not just across the room, but somewhere far beyond the walls of the Orium. He recognized it finally, the look. And he should have known. She'd had it earlier, sitting there alone across the room, but he had mistaken it for something personal directed at him, for whatever version of an argument they had stumbled into earlier in the battle circle. She'd had it then, too, in that moment, bathing in the sun within the circle. At least now he saw it for what it was, an escape. She would drift away just like this 6 years ago, the year before they entered training at the Orium. Back then, her mother had recently died. Slowly, the far-off stairs faded as she returned to whatever normalcy of life they could call their own, and soon after had begun their training. In the past year, the look had returned from time to time, but never quite as intense as this. And then he remembered. It was almost exactly a year ago now, when the loud cheering of students yanked Wilt back into the moment. It came from the far end of the hall, where Dragarin now stood on the top of a long table, his back to them. On either side of him and around the table, raucous students shouted and taunted, their voices rising above the general clamor of the room. "Everyone," he said, "fill your mugs." "A toast?" a voice asked from the crowd. A girl, it sounded like, a middle adept, maybe 13. Dragarin turned about, craning his head from the left of the room, slowly, all the way to the right. The eyes of the students, even some of the magisters, looked back and up at him with something approaching a sense of awe. Dragarin had that way about him. He seemed to see you, directly, even in the midst of a crowd. Whether it was something instilled into him as a member of the royal court or something intrinsic to who he was, often set Wilt's mind to wonder. Either way, he held the room enwrapped, silent, as he held them waiting with breath bated. "Well," Gora blurted, breaking the spell, "what says the Prince of Kailadon, O sixth in the line highness of highnesses?" "A toast," Dragarin responded, confidently, almost quietly. And the entire hall erupted in cheers. "Come on," Tenna said, grabbing Wilt firmly by the arm. She pulled him up suddenly, causing him to stumble forward as she led him through the group to stand behind Dragarin. "Chosen, where's your mug?" Gora taunted. "We know you just had one," he chuckled. "Leave him alone," Brid said. Her voice was dull, yet still sharp enough to cut through the noise. Gora hesitated, visibly weighing his options before backing down slightly, his body and tone shifting instantly from bullish boar to best friend. "Someone get Chosen a mug." A gloved hand reached through the crowded mass of students surrounding them. Here is one," a slightly warbly voice said. It was as though the arm spoke for itself, since Will could not see the person it was attached to. Then the student passed through. Chalum Tolth. So young, he had to be an initiate adept, eager and dutiful. Gora looked impressed, and violently rubbed the boy's tousle of dark curly hair, nearly knocking him backward, almost spilling the mug's contents. "Careful," Tenna snapped at Gora, who immediately shrank. Perhaps it was the energy of the moment, or the letting down of the usual guard they'd held as everyday students, or the very nature of Morrownight, But Wilt had never noticed Gora make such swift deference to anyone in all the time he'd known him. And now, twice in the matter of minutes. One with Brid and now, Tenna? A young girl who appeared to be Chalam's separate candidate companion caught him with uncertain hands. Chalam's face tightened with the displeasure until Tenna caught his eye, offering that disarming smile she managed so effortlessly. The boy's shoulders relaxed. "Sir," Chalam said, extending the mug to Wilt. "Chosen," Gora exerted. A look from both Brid and Tenna. He shrunk again. Wilt reached for the mug, took it, then nodded his head down in gratitude. "Wilt," he said. "Wilt Garin of Camlin." "Chalam," the young adept initiate said, pulling his brown-skinned fist to his left chest in the formal salute of respect in the way those from the kingdom of Kailadon practiced. Which, not so curiously, Wilt had never seen Dragarin, a prince, engage in and do such a thing. "Tolf?" Wilt said. "Yes." The boy lit up. "Yes, from Camenden, in a small little village." "I've heard of it," Wilt said. Chalam quickly glanced to his shepherd candidate, who mirrored the look of delight, but also a bit of astonishment. Wilt turned to her, a thin girl of pale skin and blonde hair. The two of them almost reminded Wilt of Brid and himself at their age. "And you? Mahler. Corvern?" "Sir Corvern Mahler, yes, sir," she said, "of Welltown in Goth, and—" "No," Wilt interjected. He chuckled to soften it a touch, firm but not rude. "Just Wilt, and most certainly not Chosen, thank you, truly." He nodded his head in gratitude again. The two youngers, full of excitement, scurried away, their voices trailing behind them. "He knew your name. Why did they call him Chosen? I don't know. He knew your name." The excited chatter faded as they disappeared into the crowd, leaving Wilt standing a bit adrift, the mug heavy in his hand. "Quiet, everyone," a student shouted. "Quiet!" The high rumble of voices gradually subsided, lower and lower, until once again it was silent in the great hall. Majestic, Dragarin stepped to the edge of the table as if he were in the court of Karavan itself, his demeanor as though his fellow students were his subjects. "Students," he began, his voice louder. "Companions," he said, a touch softer. Then a long, drawn-out, almost a bit too long pause. His voice next in the softest register he likely could summon while still remaining audible. "Friends." Wilt made a quick survey of the immense hall. Tomorrow morning, the space would be filled with the very same students. The festive decorations would be taken down from its towering stone walls, each adept and shepherd candidate lined in rigid rank-and-file rows at attention. The hall itself was vast, yet nearly all who were present had grouped toward the far end where Dragarin stood. They watched, transfixed. Even Brid seemed caught in a spell. "Tomorrow, for some of us, will be the first day marking our last here at the Orium of Mirmon Men. Make no mistake, we hold ourselves fortunate. We are truly in the favor of Ea herself that the timing of the Advent trials falls upon the closing of our time here. Some among us have trained with the aspiration to one day bear the mantle of a magus or to serve as their shepherd, while others have sought the knowledge and skills taught within these walls for different vocations or individual pursuits entirely. Yet the Orium has nurtured us all equally. For those of us who are called onward to compete in the Advent trials, even should one fail." His eyes looked down from his perch at Tenna as he gave a deep theatrical bow. "Although I doubt anyone among us would ever fail in such an endeavor, for I personally know my future magus would never let that happen," he added with almost tangible humor, which was followed by a smattering of laughs. Then he continued, "They would not likely return to these halls which have been our home for so many years. You have all been our family, in the stead of those who share blood with who remain far away from us. And even as we leave, we may not return to them, for our calling is to be of service to the good of Atalan once united. And perhaps, someday, Atalan united once again. His Majesty is so like his royal namesake that he fills this hall with the hot air of the dragonkin themselves, Gora blurted. There were a few chuckles, and even Dragarin stretched a smile that seemed quite genuine. Pay him no mind, Dragarin said. When he gets nervous, he groans and moans like a bloated omox. The students laughed even more so, which set Gora's already red complexion to an even deeper shade. Dragarin reached a hand down extended to Gora, who was himself in the midst of laughing off, albeit nervously, the sharp jest. Gora immediately jumped up and stood on the table beside him. This, Dragarin said, a solid hand on Gora's shoulder, for better or worse, again with a humor-tinged aside, is what family is. If the two of us and our other halves make it to the Avon trials, likely we will be adversaries. But here, tonight, we are brothers and sisters of the Orium of Mirmon men. He raised his mug of Haven ale up high. Wilk glanced over to Brid. She stared down in her drink, unmoving, almost in a trance. Tonight, we are brothers and sisters. The words echoed, but with a discordant hollow when it came to the two of them. He wanted to go to her and stand beside her, but he couldn't bring himself to. It wasn't pride, it was hesitation, and perhaps fear. Tomorrow would be quite the day for them, and who knows what next, if they made it to the Advent trials. To the Orium, Dragarin said. Wilt expected a response in kind, but instead there grew a rumbling. A disturbance of turning heads and a hushed, awe-filled energy entering the hall. He could not see clearly whom had entered, but he did see the students parting away, while a long hooded figure walked in the space between them. The heavy, measured tap, tap, tap of a wooden staff sounded closer with every step. The hood was purple and moved with a stiff yet graceful tempo. The tapping stopped, as did the figure. Magus Nasir stood before them, stopping in front of the table on which Dragarin and Gora stood. Wilt felt a sharp charge of nervousness enter his body. He shrunk a bit, almost hiding, positioning himself behind a wall of students who had rushed in to glimpse her. It had been quite some time since he'd last seen her. It had been that way since he began his training at the Orium when he was 10. For the most part, she looked the same. Her cat-like face, the soft tan fur fluffled down her neck. Her whiskers drooped, not as sharp as he knew them once to be. She was old. Everyone knew that, but for perhaps the first time in his life, she appeared old to him. The youngers in particular seemed to be the most in awe of her. They had never seen her heavy purple robe laced with intricate gold stitching. Although the Felidane were the most common of the other kin across the realm, their numbers were so small that many of them still never seen one in person, only heard of them. Wilt watched Chalem's eyes, looked down to where Magus Nasir's tail should be. Chalem looked at Corvin and mouthed, "Where is it?" "I don't know, I thought..." Magus Nasir never spoke about why she had no tail. Wilt knew she used her walking staff to compensate for the lack of one. When he was much younger, she'd often call from another room for him to kindly get it. It was something about the balance of her gait. He didn't know exactly, for she would never offer an answer when it had been asked. Back then, the innocence of childhood brought on a brash directness that he would never deign to do now. He knew her well enough to know she only offered what she wanted, nothing more, nothing less. It was a pointless exercise and even trying. She looked up to Dragarin, then Gora, stern. The two quickly descended from the table. "Magus Nasir," Dragarin said, "may I, your robe? It is quite warm in here, and..." Magus Nasir looked away from him, across the room, quite like Dragarin had, She seemed to catch the eye of each and everyone present. Then she sniffed. You do have his scent, I will say that. Ma'am? Who? My robe. No, I think I will keep it. She sniffed again as though testing the air with her Felidane nose. The warmth tonight is unseasonable, yes, but it will fall by night's end tomorrow. Ma'am? Yes, ma'am. She caught Wilt's eye. Gora immediately saw this and let slip a little grin as Wilt turned to look to him. Chosen, Gora mouthed the words toward Wilt. Wilt dropped his eyes down to the floor. Magus Nasir, she said. Nalana to my friends. Nalana, Dragarin repeated. You, young master, she said, her eyes looking away from Dragarin scanning the room, are not my friend. It didn't seem possible, but Dragarin seemed to deflate. Worry not. I have not had a friend, a true one, in quite some time. Centuries, maybe. It all becomes cloudy after the first millennia. Wilt had skillfully, or so he had thought, mingled amongst the students shuffling and filing through the main doors of the hall. He made it past Magus Nasir unnoticed and let out an exaggerated sigh. Gora had already given him enough of a ribbing. He didn't need any more fuel to the fool's fire. But then, Wilt. Her voice was inquisitive yet firm. He remembered the way she'd said it from when he was only a small child. He and Magus Nasir in her small domicile, as she began to give him a command concealed as a question. A hand clenched his shoulder, strong, yet it felt plush and soft all the same. Wilt stopped and turned. Magus behind him. He was no longer a child looking up to her, yet still he felt like it while looking down. Young Brittain, she sniffed. Where is she? The question took him a bit by surprise. He had expected some other question or line of inquiry. Are you ready for tomorrow? Did you practice your most troublesome sages? I would expect you to be in bed by now. It is far too late, and you need your sleep. Anything but asking about Brid. Wilt didn't even bother to look. She was here. Only a few minutes ago I saw her last. I don't know. The look on Magus Nasir's face, suspicious. She squinted her eyes, the vertical slits glinting gently. Another sniff. Very well, she said. Off to bed. It is far too late and you need your sleep. Wilt didn't bother a response. He lowered his head and tried to hide himself in plain sight. Gora even bumped him in the shoulder, and Wilt ignored it. He walked with the rest of the students through the hallways until he reached the courtyard. At the entrance, Tenna stood. She seemed to be waiting for him. Good night, Wilt, Tenna said. Good night, he replied. He took a few more steps, then stopped. Have you been here for a bit? Not too long, but I was one of the first to leave. Can you believe my very own shepherd candidate didn't invite me to toast with him? Her tone was in jest, but there was a seriousness behind it as well. I'll be the... Did you see Brid? Inside? Yes. No. Leaving. Tenna paused for quite a few seconds before she simply replied, No, but you of all people should know how she is about, well, everything. I was going to say crowds, but the tinge of alarm that had risen in Wilt subsided a shade. You're probably... He searched for the truth behind his thoughts. She probably went back to her room. He left Tenna without speaking another word. Further away, a glance over his shoulder. She walked with Dragarin, Gora, and Kent now. Gora, as usual, was loud as ever. As he made his way across the courtyard to the tower that held his room, Brid slipped further from his mind. He forced it away more than letting it naturally subside, but it was for the best. Tomorrow would already be stressful enough finding sleep without worrying about her. She always had a way of finding herself apart, and tonight was no different. It was likely why Magus Nasir asked. She knew Brid almost as well as Wilt did. Sometimes he thought, oddly somehow, even better. Nevertheless, she would be there in the morning, ready. He hoped. Thank you for listening to The First Noel. Sound production by Forge Creation. The First Noel theme by Marianthi Bezaridis. Join our Patreon and Instagram at First Noel Chronicles for news and updates. And please be so wonderful to like, share, and subscribe as we journey through the world of Eos. Next time, The Promise.